We continue now at the top of Daf Samichamid Beis and Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 60b. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that there was a barrel de ifka laorcha, that it split according to its length. Idri hahu ovid kochavim chavka, and a certain ovid kochavim, an idolater, he jumped up and he essentially hugged the barrel to keep the parts together so that the wine would not spill out. Rashi explains the ifka la'orcha kishiyo sheves as a kufa, it was standing up. Nistika mil malamat, again it split lengthwise. Uvikesh chetzia lipol elech v'chetzia lipol elech. One half was going to fall in one direction, the other half was going to fall in the other direction. So chavka bein zroosav, so he hugged it between his arms. V'chibroi, he attached the two sides at shehiviu kli, until they were able to bring a vessel to catch all of the wine. And the question was again whether the wine is permitted or not. And the Gemara says, Sharia Rafram Bar Papa. Rafram Bar Papa said that the wine was permitted. V'itema Ravuna Breid Rav Yoshua lezavune lov de kochavim. Some say it wasn't Rafram Bar Papa, but it was Ravuna Breid Rav Yoshua. In any case, whoever it was, they permitted lezavune lov de kochavim. They permitted them to sell that barrel of wine to ovdei kochavim, to idolaters. And the Gemara notes, V'hani mili de paka laorcha, and that's true if it splits lengthwise. Aval lepusya, but let's say it's split widthwise. What that would mean is essentially that the top of the barrel was just sitting on top of the bottom part of the barrel. It just needed to be pushed down a little so the wine would not escape. So then we could be even more lenient. Afilu b'shasiya shari. It's not only permitted to sell it to ovdei kochavim, it's even permitted to drink it in that situation. My time, what's the reason? Ma'isa leveina ka. Really all he's doing is the actions of a brick. It's essentially the same thing as if a brick would have been put on top of the barrel and would hold down the top half on top of the bottom half. That's the same thing. That's not enough action by the oved kochavim in order to prohibit the wine. And Rashi explains, again, in the case where the barrel split lengthwise, it was permitted lezavune leovdei kochavim, to sell the barrel of wine to idolaters, to halo shichshich, because there was no agitation of the wine. V'afilu shekirv hachatzoin zu lezu, and even though he brought the two halves of the barrel close together to one another, v'havin nogeya biyayin al yedei chatzoi hachavis, he's essentially touching the wine through something else, through these halves of the barrel. Lo havikin nogeya bekane, that's not the same as touching the wine with a pole. Dehasam meshachshich bekane, because there he's agitating the wine with the pole. Aval hacha leka shichshich midi, here there's no agitation at all. Aval lepusya, but if it splits widthwise, hoel ve'iniv dalo zemizeh, so they're not really separated. The two halves of the barrel in that case are not separated from one another. Sharei chetzio ha'elyon yoshev al hatachton, because the upper half is sitting right on top of the lower half. Ela sheyotze ma'at, it's just that some wine is spilling out. Ve'ovid kochavim hechbidon zu lezu, so the ovid kochavim just has to make the top half a little heavier on top of the bottom. Ve'lo havin nogeya, that's not called touching. V'dochak yayin hachavis, that's not called nogeya and pushing the wine of the chavis, and therefore it is not a problem. Elamaisa levena, he's just acting like a brick. Bialma, just like a mere brick. Ka'avid kilevena hanasun al pi hachavis umachvidasa, just like weighing down the barrel. And the Gemara continues, Hahu ovid kochavim deshtakach dahavikoi b'matzarta, there was an idolater, and he was found standing in a wine press. Amar Ravashi said, I'ika tofach lahatfiach, if there's enough wine left in the wine press that it can make other items wet, boy hadacha uboy nigov, then you're going to need rinsing and drying. V'ilo, but if not, so b'hadacha bi'alma sagile, then it's enough with merely rinsing. And Rashi explains, he was standing in the wine press di Yisrael. This was a Jewish wine press. There was no wine in this wine press. And there was just a little drops of wine left on the wine press. And so the question is, how much cleaning does the wine press need? And so again, Rav Ashi said, if it's tofach lahatviach, if there's enough wine that it could get other surfaces wet, so then you need to have hadacha and nigov, which literally translates as rinsing and drying. But Rashi explains nigov is afer umayim ve'afer. It's a special cleansing process, which is ashes, water, and ashes. That cleansing process is going to be explained further on in Perek HaSocher. And again, if it's not even tofach lahatviach, if there's so little wine that it can't cause wetness to other surfaces, so then rinsing alone will be sufficient. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Oved kochavim shenimtza omed betzad habor shel yayin. If an Oved kochavim, an idolater, is found standing next to the bor, that's the cistern that has the wine in it, im yeshlo milva olav, if he has a loan against him, meaning the Oved kochavim is owed money by the Jew who's the owner of this pit of wine, usher, then the wine is forbidden. Ein lo milva olav, but if the Oved kochavim is not owed any money, so then mutter, so then it is permitted. Nafal lebor, let's say the Oved kochavim falls into the pit of wine, v'yola, and then he comes out, or Modado Bekana, let's say he measures it with a pole, or Hitiz Esatzira Bekana, let's say there's a hornet inside and he hits it aside with a pole, or Shahaya Matfiach Al Pi HaChavis Merusachas, or let's say he's removing the foam on top of a barrel of wine which is fermenting. Bechol Elu Hayamaisa, all of these were actual incidents. The Amru Yimacher, and the Chachamim said that the wine could be sold, you couldn't drink the wine, but you could sell the wine. Rabbi Shimon Matir, and Rabbi Shimon permitted even to drink the wine. Let's say the Over Kochavim took a barrel of wine and he threw it in his anger into the pit of wine, into the cistern. This also was an incident, and they said that it was permitted. And Rashi explains, Im yeshlo olav milva, again, this is the case where he's standing next to the bor shal yayin. If he has a loan al Yisrael, if he has a loan against the Jew, usher, so then the wine is forbidden. Lefi shelo yore liga, because in that case he's not afraid to touch the wine. To savar, because he thinks, yamar li midi, if he says anything to me, amino le, I'll say to him, teneu li bechovi, give me this wine, because you owe me money. Nafal ovid kochavim bebor mola yayin. The next case of the Mishnah was, let's say the Oved Kochavim falls into the pit, which is full of water. Even though he's touching the wine directly, it is going to be mutter, since that was not with any intention. If he measures it with a pole, even though there is intention, since he had intention for something else, the measuring, it's also not direct touching, it's only through the pole, so then again, it is also going to be permitted in that case. Now, in these cases over here, where it says mod nafal labor, or moddo bekana, or hitis as hatzira bekana, or matfiach al pi chavis merusachas, again, the Chachamim said yimocher. When the Chachamim said permitted, they said that it was permitted to sell the wine, and Rabbi Shimon said that it was permitted even to drink from the wine. And then the last case, natalas hachavis v'zarka b'chamos labor, let's say he takes the barrel and he throws it in his anger into the pit. So we'll see in a moment that was going to be permitted even b'shasiya, even to drink. Rashi continues, Hamarusachas, again, that was the fermenting wine where he takes the foam. It's fermenting and there's foam. And he actually removes the foam directly with his hand. That is not considered to be libation. And again, it is mutter in hana. In that situation, you can derive benefit. And the last Rashi, this was a case, and they said it was permitted. Af b'shasiya. That's the case again where he throws the barrel of wine in anger into the cistern of wine. So there it's permitted even b'shasiya, even to drink. And the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel says, V'husha yesh lo milva al oso yayin. The case of the Mishnah, where we say the wine is prohibited, is if the Oved Kochavim has a loan on that wine, then we say already that the wine is going to be prohibited. Rashi explains, Al oso yayin, sha'aso lo Yisrael as hayayin hazeh apoteki, legabos heimenu. The Jew made this wine what's called an apoteki, that if the Oved Kochavim is going to collect his loan, he should collect specifically from this wine. Tahashta som chadaite v'naga v'lo mirsas. That's the case where the Oved Kochavim who's standing by the wine, he relies on it, he'll touch it, he's not afraid, because in a certain sense, it belongs to him. Let's say he just has a loan against the Jew, but it's not an apoteki on that particular wine. Even though there's a loan against the owner, mutter b'shasi, still it's permitted to drink the wine. Demirtas v'lo naga, it's not really his wine, he's afraid, and he's not going to touch the wine. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Masnisa nami daika. We see this from the Mishnah as well. This is the Mishnah coming up. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah coming up, Hamitaher yeno shel oved kochavim. Let's say somebody is purifying the wine of an oved kochavim. What that means is essentially the wine is going to be produced by a Jew, so that it's going to be considered kosher for Jews to take from that wine. V'nos no b'reshuso, and then he puts it in his reshus. V'halo kosev lo, and he writes to him, meaning the oved kochavim writes to the Jew, Hiskabalti mimchamos, I've received from you the money. So then mutter, then it's permitted. The idea is that if the Oved Kochavim is writing down that I've received the money, essentially that's considered already in the possession of the Jew. But if it's a situation where if the Jew wants to take the wine, the Oved Kochavim will not allow him until he gets his money. So the Jew really doesn't have that possession of the wine. This was actually an incident in Beis Shan, and they said it was prohibited. And so the Gemara infers from the Mishnah Taima de'ein menicho. So the only reason why it's a problem is because the Oved Kochavim doesn't let him take the wine. Hamanicho shari, but as long as he lets the Yisrael take the wine, it would apparently be permitted. And so Shema Mino, we see from that, milva aloso yayin bo'inon, Shema Mino, we see from there that it needs to be a loan on the wine in order to create the prohibition. As long as there's not a loan directly on the wine, it should be permitted, just like Hamanicho shari. If the Oved Kochavim allows him, it would be permitted. And the Gemara says, indeed, we see that that is the case. And Rashi explains, Hamitari Yeno shel Oved Kochavim, if he purifies the wine of an Oved Kochavim, that's Yisrael, Shedorach Anavim shel Oved Kochavim Beheter, this is a Jew who's treading upon the grapes of an idolater with permission, Kedei L'machro Yisrael, the purpose of this is in order to be able to sell it to a Jew, Ve'ein nosein mos l'Oved Kochavim ad sheyimcherenu la'achar zman. Now he's only going to actually give the money to the Oved Kochavim when he sells it to someone else after some time. Ve'nosein b'reshuso shel Oved Kochavim, and at this point in time, it is in the possession of the Oved Kochavim. And so the Mishnah said, V'alo kosev lo hiskabalti. If the Oved Kochavim wrote to him that I've received the money, Im kosev lo Oved Kochavim hiskabalti mimchamos. If the Oved Kochavim writes to him, I've received the money, Kilomar, what this means to say is, Hareinu ki'ilu kibalti mos. It's as if I have received the money. She'eni ma'akev biyodcha lahotzi yayin mirashusi. The point over here is that I'm not going to hold you back from taking this wine from my possession, b'chol eis shatirtz, at any time that you want. So then mutter, then it is permitted, im yesh mafteach o chosam biyad Yisrael, if there's a key or there's a seal in the hands of the Jew. But again, if the situation is where the Oved Kochavim says, I'm not going to allow you to take it until I receive the money, so Zeho Yamaisa beBeis Shan v'Yosro, this was actually an incident in Beis Shan, and they said it was forbidden. The Kevan Yeshlo Milva Al Oso Yayin, Mai Deboyav, since he has a loan on that wine, and he does what he wants. Avol Milva She'ena Al Oso Yayin, Kami She'en Lo Alav Dami, but if there's no loan on that wine, it's like nothing. The Katani Reisha, because it says in the beginning, Halo Kosev Lo Hiskabalti Mimchamos Mutter, that if he says, I receive the money from you, it's mutter. Now, in this case, when he says, it's as if I received the money, really he is owed money. There is a milva against the Jew. But it says, since it's not being held against that wine, it is mutter, and so therefore, again, you see, it's only problematic when there's a loan against the wine. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Nafa lebor viola. If the Oved Kochavim fell into the pit of wine and he came out, so then we say that the wine is permitted. And the Gemara says, Amar Rapapa says, Lo shanu ela sha'ola meis. That's only true if he came out dead. Aval ola chai, but if he came out of the wine alive, asr, it actually is prohibited. My time, what's the reason? Amar Rapapa says, the domi olek yomedam, because then already it would be like a holiday. They would be celebrating that he was saved, and therefore he would offer that wine as a libation, and it would be problematic. And Rashi explains, the domi olek yomedam, it would be like their holiday. V'yazal umoda al shanitzel, he'll go and he'll give thanks that he was saved. Umistama nasche baliyasov asr bahana, and mistama, he poured it as a libation when he came out, and it will be prohibited to get benefit from that wine. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Modado bekan, if he measures it with a pole, Kol elu hayamaisa, all of these were actual incidents. V'yamru yimacher, and they said it should be sold. It's permitted to get benefit, but you cannot drink. Rabbi Shimon matter, and Rabbi Shimon said it's permitted even to drink the wine. Amar Avodah Zarah says, Yanuchu lo Rabbi Shimon brachas al rosher, there should be blessings on the head of Rabbi Shimon, kishu matter, because when he says it's permitted, matter afilu b'shasiyah, he says it's permitted even to drink. Ukishu oser, and when he says it's prohibited, oser afilu b'hano, he says it's prohibited even to get benefit. Amar Rabbi Chia Bereda Abba bar Nachmeni, Amar Rav Chisda Amar Rav, Rav Chia, the son of Abba bar Nachmeni, says that Rav Chisda says that Rav says, V'amri lo, some have the version as follows, Amar Rav Chisda Amar Zeiri, that Rav Chisda says that Zeiri says, halacha Rabbi Shimon. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. Iko di Amri, there are those that say, Amar Rav Chisda says, Amar li Abba bar Chanan, Abba bar Chanan said to me, Hachi Amar Zeiri, this is what Zeiri said, halacha Rabbi Shimon, the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, v'yein halacha Rabbi Shimon, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Not al chavis, if the Oved Kochavim took a barrel, v'zarka b'chamaso labor, and he threw it in his anger to the cistern of wine, zeho yamaisa, this was an incident, v'echshiro, and they said it was permitted. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ashi says, Kol shebezav tamei, any situation of a zav where we say tamei, be'oved kochavim osi yayin nesech. If the idolater does that with wine, it would be yayin nesech. Kol shebezav tar, any situation where the zav, we would say it's tar, it's pure, be'oved kochavim eino osi yayin nesech. So by an idolater, he would not create yayin nesech in that situation. And Rashi explains, Kol shebezav tamei, any situation which a zav makes something tamei. Lo ayri Rav Ashi beheset klal ela b'maga. Rashi says Rav Ashi is not talking about heset, which is the tumah that a zav imparts by carrying. Rather, we're talking about maga, which is the tumah that a zav imparts by touching. V'lo asar lashminan elo zorak be'ovid kochavim delo asar. The whole point of Rav Ashi is to teach that if the ovid kochavim throws something at the wine, so then it is not going to be forbidden. V'achi kamar, this is what Rav Ashi is saying. Kol maga shebezav tamei, anytime a zav causes something to be tamei through touching, kegon bechiburin, for example, it's directly attached. Bein biyado, bein bekana would mean, for example, he uses his hand or even a pole. Shema ovid kochavim zav v'akli adam etamei bezav. A case could be, for example, let's say the ovid kochavim is a zav, and then he's causing a kli, a vessel, or he's causing a person to be tamei. If he causes that kli or that adam to be tamei through touching, afayayin nasa bekach yayin nesach. In the same fashion, wine would become yayin nesach. Rashi gives an example. Kagon, for example, Adam hanogeya bezav. Let's say a person touches a zav. Bein shenogabo hazav mamish, bein bekana. Whether it's a direct touching or whether it's with a pole, tamei. The halacha is that causes the person to become tamei. So afayayin, the same is true by wine. Shenogabo ovid kochavim bein biyado bein bekana. If an ovid kochavim touches the wine with his hand or a pole, nasa yayin nesach. It becomes yayin nesach, and that's the idea. But that would not be true. Let's say if the zav throws something at somebody, that doesn't make that person tamei, and the same is true when it comes to the yayin. If you throw at the wine, so then it's not going to become tamei. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rav Huna Rav Ashi. Rav Huna asked Rav Ashi a question from our Mishnah. What did it say in our Mishnah? It said, Natal esachavis, if he takes the barrel, v'zorka b'chamoso leborn, he throws it in his anger at the pit of wine. Zeho yamaisa b'beis shan v'chshiro. This was an incident in Beis Shan, and it was permitted. And the Gemara says, b'chamoso, in the only reason it's permitted is because he did it in anger, and so therefore he didn't really have intention. But shelo b'chamoso lo, but apparently if he did not do it in anger, then it would be a problem. And Rashi says, Shalo b'chamoso lo, al mazara ka'ovid kochavim. Don't you see from the Mishnah that if the ovid kochavim throws something at the wine, asa yayin esach, he creates yayin esach. V'ilu zav shezara chayfetz b'kli lo timo. Now, if a zav would throw an object into a vessel, he would not make it tamei. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Aleph Amud Aleph.